The company is being sold tomorrow. I am taking the cash, Selena is getting the rest. And you, Natalie, you are fired effective immediately. My father did not even put down his fork. He just looked across the Christmas dinner table and erased me. He did not care about the 10 years I spent saving his business from bankruptcy. He just smiled at my younger sister and handed her my future. Before I tell you what he signed 20 minutes later, and why he is currently homeless, drop a comment and let me know where you are listening from, and what time it is for you right now. I want to see how far this story travels. I did not flip the table. I did not throw my wine in his face. I did not give him the satisfaction of seeing a single tear. Excuse me, I said, placing my napkin on the table with surgical precision. I need to use the powder room before we handle the paperwork. Nicholas waved his hand dismissively, already turning back to pour more champagne for Selena. He thought I was running away to cry. He thought I was broken. He did not realize that in the world of corporate finance, the person who leaves the room first is usually the one controlling the exit strategy. I walked out of the dining room, my heels clicking a steady rhythm on the marble floor. I did not go to the bathroom. I walked straight down the hall to the library, closing the heavy oak doors behind me. The silence in the room was absolute. On the mahogany desk sat the standard sale agreement Nicholas believed he was signing tonight. He thought he was selling the company for $12 million to a private equity firm in Chicago. He did not know the private equity firm was a shell entity I had set up 48 hours ago, fully funded by Grandpa Silas's trust. I walked to the corner of the room where I had left my briefcase earlier that evening. My hands did not shake. I clicked the latches open and pulled out a fresh, crisp document folder I had printed 3 hours ago. It looked identical to the one on the desk. Same heavy blue cardstock cover. Same Helvetica font. Same embossed logo. But the content on page 4 was lethal. I swapped the folders. The standard sale agreement went into my bag. The restructured indemnity agreement went onto the desk. Any other criminal would be sweating right now. They would be terrified that the victim might read the fine print. They would be worried about getting caught. But I was not worried. Not even a little bit. For 10 years I have not just been Nicholas's accountant. I have been his safety net. I have been the invisible janitor cleaning up his messes. Every time he made a typo on a legal filing, I fixed it. Every time he overspent on a company card, I moved the funds to cover it. Every time he blindly signed a document without reading it, nothing bad happened. Because I was there to catch him. I had trained him. I had conditioned him like a Pavlovian dog to sign exactly where the sticky note pointed because Natalie handles the boring stuff. I had spent a decade building a monster of complacency. He trusted me not because he loved me, but because he thought I was a dull, unlovable workhorse who existed solely to serve him. His laziness was my weapon, and tonight, I was going to pull the trigger. I am Natalie. I am 32 years old. I am the chief financial officer of a company that was built on my grandfather's sweat and saved by my sleepless nights. Nicholas sees me as a mistake. He sees me as overhead. He forgot that the person who keeps the books is the only one who knows where the bodies are buried. I took a deep breath, smoothing the front of my cheap suit that he hated so much. I picked up the heavy gold fountain pen from the desk holder, the one he liked to use for historic moments. I checked my reflection in the library window. There was no fear in my eyes. There was only the cold, hard clarity of a balance sheet that was finally about to be reconciled. I turned around and walked back toward the dining room. It was time to close the deal. If this was just about him firing me, maybe I would have walked away. Maybe I would have let him sell the company, take his golden parachute, and rot in his own mediocrity. I was used to his cruelty. I had built a callus over my heart where his fatherly love was supposed to be. But this was not about me. This was not about a daughter getting cut out of a will. This was about the spreadsheet I had opened 72 hours ago in a cold, empty office. It started as a routine pre-sale audit. I was scrubbing the books, making sure the valuation was tight for the private equity deal Nicholas thought he was closing. That is when I saw the discrepancy. It was subtle at first, a series of consulting fees paid to a shell company in Nevis. But when I drilled down into the general ledger, the truth hit me like a physical blow. The operating capital was fine. The profit margins were thin but stable. The hole was not in the corporate account. It was in the employee pension fund. $850,000. Gone. Nicholas had not just stiffed me. He had gutted the retirement savings of the 52 machinists, drivers, and warehouse workers who kept this business alive. Men like Mr. Henderson, our head of security, who had worked the night shift for 20 years so he could retire with dignity. Women like Mrs. Gable in payroll, who trusted us with her future. Nicholas had drained it all. And I knew exactly where it went. I had seen the markers of his gambling addiction for years. The frantic calls to investors who sounded like loan sharks. the sudden trips to Vegas for conferences that did not exist. He had bet the livelihoods of 50 families on a bad hand, and he had lost. I tightened my grip on the door handle of the library, but I did not open it yet. I let the memory of earlier this evening wash over me, fueling the fire in my chest. 3 hours ago, when the guests began arriving for the Christmas gala, Nicholas had pulled me into the kitchen. I was wearing my best suit, a charcoal gray blazer I had saved up for. He looked me up and down with a sneer that made me feel 6 years old again. "You look like a funeral director, Natalie," he had said, laughing loud enough for the catering staff to hear. "Do something useful. The servers are backed up. Take a tray and get Selena's friends some more Pinot Noir." He made the CFO of his company serve wine to my younger sister's influencer friends. I did it. I walked around the room with a silver tray. Invisible. While Selena held court in a silk dress that cost more than my car. But as I poured the wine, I noticed something. I saw the watch on Nicholas's wrist. It was a new Patek Philippe. Rose gold. Perpetual calendar. I know the market price for that watch. It was roughly $80,000. That watch was 2 years of Mr. Henderson's pension. That was the moment the sadness died. That was the moment the little girl who just wanted her daddy to be proud of her finally stopped breathing. I looked at him laughing with his rich friends, wearing stolen time on his wrist. And I realized he was not just a bad father. He was a parasite. I was not going back into that dining room to negotiate. I was not going back in there to make a scene. I was going back in there to euthanize a rabid animal before it could bite anyone else. I smoothed my cheap blazer. I adjusted the cuffs. I looked at the heavy oak doors separating me from the party. "You want to treat me like the help, Nicholas?" I whispered to the empty hallway. "Fine. I will help you sign your death warrant." I pushed the doors open and stepped back into the light. The library doors swung open, and the noise of the party bled into the room for a second before being cut off again. Nicholas walked in, a half-empty champagne flute in one hand, his face flushed with the kind of manic energy that comes from adrenaline and expensive liquor. He did not look at the papers. He looked at me, his lip curling in that familiar expression of disappointment. "Still hiding in here?" he asked, walking to the sidebar to top off his drink from a crystal decanter. "Selena is out there charming the investors. She is radiant. You are lurking in the shadows like a gargoyle." I stood behind the desk, my hands resting flat on the leather surface, right next to the restructured indemnity agreement. I did not move. "I needed to prepare the notary seal," I said, my voice flat. "You want this sale to close tonight, do you not?" "I want the wire transfer tonight," he snapped, turning around. "The buyers are waiting. The jet is fueled. By tomorrow morning, I will be in Monaco. And this rust bucket factory will be someone else's headache." He took a long swallow of his drink, some of it spilling onto his silk tie. He did not notice. He was vibrating with desperation. I knew why. The bookies were not just calling anymore. They were sending people to his house. He was not retiring. He was running. "What about the employees?" I asked. I knew the answer, but I wanted to hear him say it. I wanted to add it to the tally. "Mr. Henderson? The warehouse team? The new owners are going to liquidate the assets. They will all be fired." Nicholas laughed. It was a wet, ugly sound. "They are lucky I paid them at all. They are overhead, Natalie. Just like you." He walked over to the desk, invading my personal space. He smelled of scotch and stale fear. He leaned in close, his eyes bloodshot. "You think I care about them? I spent 30 years dragging this family uphill. I deserve my payout. I deserve to live without you people dragging me down." He reached out and flicked the lapel of my blazer. "You know, you are just like your Uncle David. You have his weak chin, his loser eyes. He did not have the stomach for business either. He died broke. And you are going to die alone." He thought he was hurting me. He thought he was twisting the knife. But he was wrong. David was the only man in this family who had ever treated me with kindness. David was the one who taught me how to read a balance sheet when I was 12. Nicholas thought comparing me to David was an insult. To me, it was a confirmation that I was on the right side of this war. "Just sign the papers, Nicholas," I said. He grabbed the heavy gold pen from my hand, his fingers brushing mine. His skin was clammy. "Do not tell me what to do," he sneered. "Just put your little stamp on the page and make yourself useful for once." He looked down at the document. For a second, my heart hammered against my ribs. The title on the cover page was correct. But if he flipped to page 4, if he read the personal guarantee clause, it was over. He flipped the cover open. I held my breath. "Where is the signature line?" he demanded, flipping past the first 3 pages without even glancing at the text. He was too drunk, too arrogant, and too used to me fixing his typos to bother reading. "Page 5, I said. Right at the bottom, he found the line. He did not hesitate. He slashed his signature across the paper with a violent flourish. the nib of the pen tearing slightly into the page. Nicholas Fairbanks. He tossed the pen onto the desk. Done. Notarize it. Then get out of my office. I have a party to enjoy. I picked up my notary stamp. I aligned it carefully next to his signature. I pressed down. The sound echoed in the quiet room like a gavel striking a bench. He smirked at me, grabbed his drink, and turned back toward the door. Try to smile, Natalie. You look miserable. It brings down the property value. He walked out, slamming the heavy doors behind him. I looked down at the document. The ink was still wet. He thought he had just sold the company for $12 million. He did not know he had just personally guaranteed a shortfall of $850,000, collateralized by his manor, his cars, and his private stock portfolio. He had not just signed a sale agreement. He had signed his eviction notice. I closed the folder. I picked up the pen he had thrown. I put them both into my briefcase and snapped the locks shut. It was time to join the party. I walked back into the dining room, the heavy folder tucked under my arm like a loaded weapon. The atmosphere had shifted. The polite murmur of the cocktail hour had been replaced by the boisterous, slightly desperate energy of a man who thinks he has just outrun a predator. Nicholas was standing at the head of the table, tapping a crystal spoon against his champagne flute. The sound rang out, sharp and piercing, silencing the room. "Attention, everyone," he boomed. His face flushed a deep, unhealthy red. He swayed slightly, steadying himself on the back of Grandpa Silas's wheelchair. Grandpa sat motionless, his chin resting on his chest, feigning the sleep of the senile and helpless. Nicholas did not even look at him. To Nicholas, his father was just a prop in the background of his victory lap. "I have a special announcement," Nicholas said, raising his glass. "Tonight is not just a Christmas party. It is a farewell. I have just successfully negotiated the sale of Fairbanks Industries for $12 million. Tomorrow, I retire." A ripple of polite applause went through the room. Selina squealed, clapping her hands and looking around for cameras to capture her reaction. I stood in the doorway, watching them. I felt a strange, cold detachment, like a surgeon looking at a patient on the table. Nicholas did not know what he had just done. In his arrogance, and in his rush to beat the midnight deadline his bookie had texted him about, he had skipped the only paragraph that mattered. He thought he had signed a standard asset purchase agreement. He had not. I had swapped it for a conditional solvency and indemnity agreement. It is a nasty piece of legal engineering, usually reserved for distressed assets, but perfectly legal if the seller signs it willingly. The terms were simple but devastating. The contract stated that the sale price was contingent on the company's cash reserves meeting a specific threshold, a threshold that included the fully funded employee pension plan. The moment he signed his name, he legally certified that the pension fund was full. But the pension fund was not full. It was missing $850,000 because he stole it. And here was the trap. The clawback clause on page 4 triggered an automatic reconciliation. If a shortfall was detected during the solvency test, which my system would auto-run at midnight, the seller, meaning Nicholas, became personally liable for the difference. And since the company did not have the cash to cover his theft, the contract explicitly collateralized his personal assets to make up the deficit. He had not just sold the company. He had unknowingly pledged his manor, his vintage car collection, and his personal stock portfolio as collateral to cover the money he stole. He raised his glass higher, beaming at the room. "To new beginnings," he shouted. "And to leaving the dead weight behind." He looked directly at me when he said it. He grinned, a predator baring his teeth. He thought he had won. He thought he was flying to Monaco with a bag full of cash. He did not realize he had just signed a confession and a bankruptcy filing on the same page. I raised my water glass in a silent toast to reading the fine print. Nicholas. I walked over to the side table where the notary logbook sat. I placed the signed folder next to it, ready for the auditors. The trap was set. The cage door was closed. Now, all I had to do was wait for him to realize he was locked in. Nicholas pulled me into the alcove near the kitchen, away from the guests but close enough that I could smell the expensive cologne he used to mask the scent of his panic. He was smiling, but it was a feral, jagged thing. "You think you are clever, do you not?" he whispered, leaning in close. "You think that little contract matters?" I stared at him, keeping my face blank. "It matters to the auditors. Auditors take months," he hissed. "I am gone tonight. And you know what the best part is? I am not leaving empty-handed." He pulled his phone out of his pocket. His thumb tapped the screen aggressively, bringing up the corporate banking app. He shoved the screen in my face. "Look at that, Natalie. Read it and weep." The door slammed. Silence. Selina rushed forward. "What about the guest house?" I handed her a paper, a job application, receptionist, minimum wage. She stared. "Then monetize somewhere else." I said. She stormed out after him. I went to Grandpa Silas. He's gone, I whispered. He squeezed my hand. I took the head of the table, pushed Nicholas's chair aside. The party's over, I said. The work begins. In the CEO office, I logged into his computer. Nicholas Fairbanks, CEO. Delete user. His name vanished. Snow fell outside. For the first time in 32 years. The quiet felt like peace.